Je suis Ivan Trésor, le zaparo de guerre. Champikilo, flèche noire. Lelele mambe, Ivan le Trésor. Lelele mambe, a Champikilo kabalande. Lelele mambe, a tu simo como en mu mambe me lo wende. Tabruka babruba, yakatelga tabruba namur. Tesa mabruba tabruba, babur, masimo ka voila.
The Ivory Coast, or Côte d'Ivoire, is a small nation in West Africa. It has a GDP of $48 billion and an inflation of 1%. 42% of the population is under the poverty line, whereas unemployment is only at 3.9%. The problem begins with the 2010 election, the first in 10 years, between Laurent Gbagbo and Alassane Ouattara. The running of the two candidates has already created tension between the people of the Ivory Coast. Ouattara's win only pushed it over the edge, causing the conflict to erupt. In the first election in 10 years, Gbagbo had been claimed the winner. However, numerous citizens stated and advocated that Ouattara was the true winner. The UN refused to acknowledge Gbagbo as the president of the Ivory Coast. Ouattara gathered forces to take control of the main city, Abidjan. Gbagbo's loyalist camps were shelling the Golf Hotel in which Ouattara was staying. The long-lasting confrontations between the loyalists and the UN peacekeepers resulted in over 3,000 civilians' deaths.
The two candidates have created long-lasting careers. Gbagbo formed the Ivorian Popular Front, a political party, and was elected the Secretary General. He was also the only candidate to stand against Houphouët-Boigny. This stand had the crucial support of Blaise Compaoré, the former president of Burkina Faso. He was elected into the National Assembly to represent the Ouagaho district. This eventually led to his nomination for the 2000 presidential election. Ouattara had a strong career to back him before his presidential campaign. He was the former economist for the International Monetary Fund. Later on, the IMF forced the Ivorian president under the Structural Adjustment Program to make Ouattara the chairman for the Interministerial Committee for Coordination of the Stabilization and Economic Recovery Program of Côte d'Ivoire. He held this position while he still held the position of governor at the Banque Centrale des États de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, or BCEAL. He then became the Prime Minister of Côte d'Ivoire under the IMF imposition and relinquished his position as the BCAO governor to Charles Konan-Banny. During his time as Prime Minister, Houphouët-Boigny was the president. Once he died, there was a power struggle between Ouattara and the President of the National Assembly, Henri Konan Bédié. Bédié eventually came to power and Ouattara resigned as Prime Minister to return to the IMF as the Deputy Managing Director until July 1999.
According to the UN Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide, genocide can be defined as the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group, as such killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births with the group, and or forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. The acts that were considered punishable include genocide, conspiracy to commit genocide, direct and public incitement to commit genocide, attempt to commit genocide, and complicity in genocide. Unfortunately, this situation does not qualify as genocide. Although 3,000 individuals were killed, neither Gbagbo's nor Ouattara's forces went into the situation with the intent of murdering a certain group of people. They just went in with the intent of gaining power that was rightfully theirs or that they were unwilling to relinquish.
3 groups have been accused of bearing the responsibility. The 2 opposing forces, the Ivorian government and the UN Security Council. The opposing forces can be said to bear the responsibility because the two military armies caused the open warfare on the streets of Abidjan, and they killed 3,000 people. The government can be to blame because it was not prepared to deal with a man who had lost the job he had for 10 years. Considering it was the first election he allowed in a decade, provisions should have been taken to effectively and safely transfer power if he had lost. The UN Security Council can be to blame for not sending adequate peacekeepers to contain the situation. However, the only peacekeepers sent were for a moderate situation. They underestimated the severity of the fighting. The only suggestion of how the situation should have been handled is directly towards the Ivorian government. The government, in preparation for the election, should have prepared an effective way to transfer power.
Gbagbo and the Ivorian government bear the blame. Gbagbo's loss led his choice to use illegal military force and cause chaos in the nation. He chose to gather forces from within the Ivory Coast and from other nations. He chose to open fire on the streets of Abidjan. However, it was also the Ivorian government's fault for being unprepared for the potential consequences if Gbagbo lost. It was reasonable to assume that since it was the first election in the nation since 2000, there was an increased chance of Gbagbo's losing just because the people didn't like him. Therefore, the government should have prepared an alternative way to safely transfer power from Gbagbo to Ouattara, in the event that Gbagbo was unwilling to step down from the position.
Gbagbo should be tried for his crimes by the state government and sentenced to jail time. In reality, the ICC tried Gbagbo for 4 crimes against humanity: murder, rape, and other forms of sexual violence, persecution, and other inhuman acts. His hearing was originally set for June 18, 2012, but was postponed to August 13, 2012. The hearing was then postponed indefinitely based on concerns for Gbagbo's health. His hearing has yet to be performed. The question is whether or not the punishment was too lenient or too harsh. It was definitely too lenient. The excuse for him not having a trial was that he was too old and sick. But he was old and sick when he decided to get involved in something that resulted in 3,000 deaths. He was old and sick when he decided to run for another term after 10 years of being in that position. Being old and sick is not a good reason for him to get out of being punished for the crimes he committed.
Olivier a connu, monsieur Gbagbo.